This episode was made possible by a joint effort by the California Institute for Behavioral Health Solutions and Advocates for Human Potential, Incorporated, and funded by the California Department of Healthcare Services, Community Services Division. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode of the Daily Dose. Today, this week's episode is going to be on the opioid crisis and the different aspects of its beginnings. Go ahead, Julian. What do you think? I know it has different various factors of how the opiate epidemic started. Where do you think some of the foundations lay, for the most part? You know, specific ones.
Well, some of the first hints of the opioid crisis were as early as the 1970s and 80s with the different heroin epidemics. The current opioid crisis that we're in right now, it's been described in several different phases. If you guys want to go look at something that goes really in depth into this, Hassan Minhaj does a really great breakdown on the Patriot Act. But pretty much there's different phases of the opioid epidemic. The current phase that we're in started in about the 90s. And what's going on is that there were a lot of pharmaceutical companies that were lobbying doctors, sort of advertising to doctors, hey, we have this medication. Can you guys prescribe it? We can incentivize you in these ways. And once doctors started doing that and they started prescribing them en masse to different people for different types of pains, those opiates had like a certain lifetime, like a certain prescription life. Like their prescription was only refillable maybe like once or twice, for example.
And I understand why they became so popular, because they're strong, right? They're really powerful.
Yeah.
It does the job versus, I know we have other pain medications that are over the counter like Advil, Tylenol, and etc.
Yeah.
And those work too, but sometimes I guess if you want to completely take care of the pain, that's where opiates come in.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that. One thing about opiates is that not only do they get rid of pain, but because of where they're located in the brain, they also cause a euphoric effect. So pretty much these doctors were prescribing an incredibly power pain medication that causes a euphoric effect, and it has a come down. So not only does it have a euphoric effect when you're taking it, but when you stop taking it, it actually hurts. So this was being prescribed en masse to people. And what ended up happening was that once their prescription ran out, it would actually physically hurt. There are also some people that would try to get their prescription refilled, and because they had already gotten it filled XYZ amount of times, it wasn't allowed to be refilled. So what ended up happening is that a lot of these people turned to illegal means. They didn't just stop cold turkey. It was much too painful. So they started looking for heroin. They started looking for different types of medication with opiates in it, maybe getting prescription from different doctors. And there's so much confusion in the opioid epidemic, because there are some places where it's incredibly hard to get prescription opioids. And there are some places that are referred to as pill mills that it's incredibly easy to get prescription opioids. So it's not that the government is doing a terrible job at regulating. It's just that there are so many different ways to get these things that it's sort of like once you plug one hole, another hole opens up. Once you plug that one, 5 more open up. And it's just becoming incredibly difficult to regulate all of these opiate medications.
And also, now that you mentioned some of the prescription side of it, I had a professor once that was talking about, he was an MD, talking about the opiate epidemic, how, doctors are always trying to please their clients, keep them happy. And so when you have clients that are suffering, let's say, from a back pain, and the doctor gives them like a Tylenol prescription or of something that's over the counter, and that doesn't work, the patients will come back and be like, "Hey, doctor, this didn't work," and because they want to keep them happy, they know that opiates will eliminate that pain very quickly. So, I
Yeah.
think, I mean, it works both ways, but through us, we're trying to change that. We're trying to bring education to everyone, especially the youth, trying to show that, hey, there is a usage for these opiates in the medical world, because it does have its medicinal purposes. It does have, I
Right.
was talking about for like palliative care and pain management for, after surgeries. So it does have its medicinal purposes, but the fact that it's become so accessible to the general public through illicit means, through press pills. We talked about an episode previously, and how these are, being mixed with fentanyl, and it, this is
Yeah.
where the major issue comes into play. So,
Well, not just. I think that one of the problems that we're also facing right now is that we're facing sort of like a deficit in education, and we're facing sort of like a surplus in fear. So there's a lot of different media outlets that are saying, "Oh, fentanyl gets into the air, everyone in the room overdoses." And through the different research that you and I have done, we both know that that's not true.
mm,
There's so much fear behind it that there's, I forgot what it's called, but there's an effect where if you tell like adolescents, if you tell like kids, don't do this, they're gonna do it.
yeah, and
So
and you always talk about the fear mongering part, right? And that's
yeah,
not what we're here to do. We're not here to tell you don't do this, don't do that, like the typical, '90s and 2000s type of drug prevention systems. We're trying to educate individuals, letting them know this is what happens. This is how it interacts with your body. This is
mm,
the possibility of the individual, find themselves in the addiction process, right?
exactly. And I feel like I feel like educators sort of need to take a bigger role in this. Um, maybe we should add it to like a health curriculum, a life skills curriculum, something like that. You and I are teaching life skills in one of the schools that we're teaching
Mm-hmm.
at. We're part of the life skills class because
Right.
this information is important to have. I think that that's a really good first step. And it's really great that you're the youth opioid response, that because we're part of that team, we're actually helping to spread awareness. And we're actually able to do that within kids who maybe haven't even heard of this. But hopefully, the first thing that they hear is, hey, this is what happens. This is why it's dangerous, but not so much as like, don't do this, don't ever do this. If you do this, only terrible things can ever come of this. I feel like that's not really the way to go, because then if you're only showing kids like the negative aspect, then the it's you're almost lying to them, you know.
Yeah.
There's obviously a medicinal purpose for these things. The problem is that if you're not taking them for medicinal purposes, you really shouldn't be taking them at all.
Mm-hmm.
The one of like the pendulum effects that happened with I think Dare in the 90s was that all the information that was being given out was, this is only terrible, this is the worst thing ever, instead of just, this is what happens, this is what some people experience, some people do become addicted, some people do overdose, some people do die. If you don't want that to happen to you, don't do drugs. Don't try don't try these medications if you don't have to. I feel like taking a more logic based, a calmer approach is more helpful to kids, because that's how you teach them everything else. That's how we all learned the alphabet. It wasn't a teacher like yelling at us like, you better learn your ABCs or you're never gonna learn them ever
You had
again.
to do that little
You
twinkle
know?
twinkle song, and it kind of stuck
Yeah.
to it, huh?
And it's sort of the same. It's the same thing with the opioid epidemic. We got to learn it like step by step. Maybe if you're too busy doing opiates, you're not going to want to be with your friends.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're too busy doing opiates, you're not going to want to go paint. You're not going to want to go run.
And as our audience, if you find yourself being that youth that is watching us, ask yourself that question. Ask yourself that question: how much do you know about opiates? Because it's going to be given to you at some point of your life. You know, when you have maybe surgery, you know, like an appendix removal, or you know, hopefully you don't have a broken bone or anything like that. But it's going to be offered to you, and opening that dialogue with your doctor. Sometimes we don't talk
Mhm.
to our doctors. We just take the prescription. Thank you. Have a nice day. Right? We don't ask them, hey, where are you giving me? Is there an alternative to this? So opening that dialogue with our health providers will make that connection stronger between the patient and the doctor, just by asking simple, very simple questions. We're gonna go. I mean, most of us go through that procedure where our, you know, wisdom teeth are removed, and opiates can be given as a pain management medication. And asking the doctor, "Hey, is there an alternative to this?" So think about it as the youth that are watching us. Find, kind of make a list, a mental list. How much do you know about opiates? And not because of the social side, you know, like music and Percocets and Lean Molly, just but on the medicinal side, what do you know about it? And research it. Now that we all have, you know, a library encyclopedia in the palm of our hands, use it for research purposes. We could research any topic immediately and have instant feedback. Yes, you kind of have to dig through, you know, fact checking websites, you know, but look into government websites. They usually provide all the useful information that you want to know very easily. So,
And also, if I know that for me, when I was like 14, 15, anything that the government said, I did not trust it. So if you want to like double check these numbers anywhere else, that's what I would do. I feel like anytime that you see numbers somewhere, you can look it up somewhere else, and then if that's true, if you check the source, then that's fine. And it's just an extra second to look something else up if you're not trusting what you're seeing. And then if the original thing that you're getting it from, for example, one of the biggest resources that we use is the National Institute of Health. And honestly, like when I first saw it, that knee jerk reaction of like, "Ooh, it's the government. I don't know if
yeah,
I should trust the government." That knee jerk reaction really did kick in. But when I started like looking up the resources, when I started looking up the original source, where are they citing this from, everything checked out. And I think that as my trust slowly started to grow with all these things, as I started getting older and I started realizing like, oh, this is just information. Oh, well, they can't put up something that is clearly false.
yeah,
Um,
they're going to
uh,
back up the research.
yeah, everything was being backed up by research. Um, and you know what's funny, Juan, is, or not funny, but you know what's one of the things that I noticed is that the number of people who are overdosing has been increasing throughout the years. Um, what one of the things that I saw that we could touch in a little bit, like on our next podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that I saw was that opioid overdose deaths have been like spiking, and there was a small dip. There was like a small dip, I think last year or 2 years ago, and that's when naloxone became a spray. When it was available as like a spray, it just goes in the nose, because
Yeah.
before it was an injection. That's the only time that there has been a small dip in the
Yeah,
overdose
there
deaths.
has been a curve,
Yeah.
and it's because they, for example, in our state, they've taken the prescription part. You don't need prescription to get the naloxone.
Hmm.
It could be technically over the counter, but you're right. It has exponentially been growing for the
Yeah.
past couple years, and especially, I mean, we still don't have, for example, 2020's statistical data because we're still in 2020,
Hmm.
but things are not looking good, you know, because of the COVID pandemic,
Yeah.
the increase of anxiety, the increase of the uncertainty, you know, that are factors that adds to it. So definitely, let's put in perspective what the opiate crisis is. Julian gave an awesome explanation on the historical part, 70s, 80s, the or prescription of it. And now it's become a crisis because of the overdoses that are involved with opiates, and especially fentanyl, right? Because of its
Yeah.
availability and lack of education. So, you, the viewer, ask yourself that question: how much do you know about it? And if you don't know, use some of our resources and do a little bit of research. Use government websites. Um, there's also universities that are doing research. Use their information. There's a lot of information from your county, local municipalities. So use all the information, put it together, and make a decision of how much you know to increase your knowledge.
Yeah.
So until next time, we will see you guys again in a daily dose. So thank you, Julian. We'll see you guys next time. Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.